If someone had told me my biggest mistake would sound like a confession, I wouldn't have believed it. After one drunken night, I accidentally confessed my feelings to my billionaire boss. Hey, my loves, hit subscribe and tap that little bell. It's free, it's quick, and it means you'll never miss a single heartbeat of our next romance. And don't forget, drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where our beautiful community is tuning in from. Now, back to the story. I came to on Monday morning with a skull-splitting headache, like tiny metal hammers pounding from the inside of my skull. My apartment carried the faint, sour scent of leftover wine and panic. Sunlight carved sharply through the blinds while I tried and failed. For a beat to recall how I'd ended up in my own bed. Then it hit me hard. The memory of last Friday night surged back like a tidal wave I wasn't prepared to ride. Vivian, my boss, billionaire, intimidating, effortlessly perfect Vivian, and me, apparently declaring at full volume, in loud, unfiltered detail, my feelings for her. My feelings. I groaned and collapsed onto the pillow, bargaining with myself that maybe, just maybe, it had been a dream. But no. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand like a vindictive little alarm clock. A single unread message. We need to talk. Office now. I nearly choked on my own saliva. Now on a Monday morning, my stomach twisted into a knot the size of a bowling ball. I could feel the sweat starting to beat on my forehead despite the chill in my apartment. I tried to replay the night in my head, and the more I did, the more horrifying it became. The way my words had tumbled out in drunken, slurred honesty. The way I'd probably leaned way too close when I shouldn't have. The way my heart had practically jumped out of my chest every time she laughed at my terrible jokes. I sat up staring at the ceiling, trying to think of an excuse, a strategy, a plan of action. Anything to make this less catastrophic. Maybe I could blame it on the wine. But no, that was already obvious. Maybe I could claim I was sleep-talking. Ridiculous. My hand flew to my chest as my heart rate spiked. Even just imagining Vivian's expression when she read my message made me want to crawl under the bed and hide forever. And then the cruelest part of all hit me. I had absolutely no idea how she felt. Was she laughing at me behind my back? Was she furious? Or could it be possible that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been entirely displeased? The thought made my stomach flip, a mixture of hope and terror that was almost physically painful. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room. Disheveled hair, red-rimmed eyes, and a blouse that smelled faintly of wine and desperation. I ran a hand down my face, trying to summon some sort of courage, muttering under my breath, "You can do this. Just act normal. Act like nothing happened. Maybe she'll laugh it off." Yeah, right. Because apparently my life had just turned into a rom-com I was too sober to understand. Starring me, completely mortified, and Vivian, the mysterious, impossibly poised, probably judging billionaire who now had all the power in the world over my emotions. And Monday had only just begun. My phone buzzed again, dragging me out of my spiral of self-pity and nausea. I reached for it with trembling hands, half expecting some kind of miracle that would erase the nightmare of last Friday night. Instead, there it was, Vivian's name glowing on the screen, sharp and commanding like always. "Meet me in my office now." I froze. The words felt like a punch straight to my gut. Now, not later. Not after a coffee break. Not even after I'd had a chance to breathe. Now. My pulse spiked. My brain scrambled for escape routes, none of which existed. I was stuck. Stuck in a situation where my entire professional life, and apparently my personal dignity, was dangling by the tiniest thread. I stared at the message as if staring harder could somehow erase it. I could practically hear my own heartbeat, hammering like a drum line in my ears. "Okay," I told myself. "You're a functioning adult. You can handle this. Just walk in there like nothing happened. Smile. Maybe she's joking. Maybe she's going to laugh it off. Yeah, That's totally possible. Except deep down, I knew Vivian didn't laugh off anything, especially not me. Especially not that. I tried pacing, hoping movement would calm the storm in my chest. I ran my hands through my hair, muttering nonsense under my breath. You're fine. It's fine. You're fine. She's fine. She's probably intrigued. The last word made me laugh bitterly at myself. Intrigued. I didn't even know if she saw me as a professional human being anymore, or just as a mess who drunkenly confessed her heart to the most untouchable woman in Harborview City. Then came the hardest part, imagining her expression when I walked in. Calm, immaculate, unreadable. That tiny smirk that could slice through confidence in one glance. The way her eyes seemed to see everything, like she knew all my secrets without me ever speaking. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my hands, my voice, my entire life. I shoved my phone into my pocket, muttering to myself, "You can do this. Just act like you didn't literally confess your soul to her while drunk and emotional." Yeah, sure, totally doable. Nothing like walking into the lion's den with your tail between your legs, heart pounding, and dignity long gone. And with that, I grabbed my bag, straightened my wrinkled clothes, and braced myself for what would probably be the most terrifying 5 minutes of my life. Facing Vivian, my boss, my absolute kryptonite, and the woman I had just publicly and very drunkenly told I was completely in love with, because apparently Monday mornings weren't just cruel, they were relentless. I stepped into Vivian's office, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and immediately regretted every life choice that had led me to this exact moment. The door clicked softly behind me, and there she was, Vivian, calm, unshakable, sitting behind her impossibly sleek mahogany desk, sipping her coffee like the world hadn't just flipped upside down. Her hair was perfect, her suit tailored to lethal precision, and somehow she looked entirely untouched by last night's chaos. My stomach twisted into a pretzel, my brain short-circuited. I opened my mouth to speak and realized I didn't actually have words. Everything smart and measured I'd rehearsed all weekend dissolved into raw panic. About last night, she began, voice smooth as glass, and that unruffled calm cinched my chest in all the worst ways. Heat climbed my cheeks. My throat went dry, like any word I tried to force out would ignite before it left my mouth. I parted my lips. Nothing. She lifted one perfectly arched eyebrow, and I swear I felt it cut straight through me. "You were very forward," she went on. I cringed so hard I thought my face might stay that way. "Forward? Very forward," I sputtered. "That's like saying someone set Harborview City on fire and only singed a couple of trees." I flailed, hands fluttering like a stranded fish. I didn't mean to. It was the wine. I wasn't fully thinking. The words tripped over each other in a hopeless pileup. Every inch of me broadcasted mortification. The air felt thin. My face burned. My hands wouldn't cooperate. I was aware of the clock ticking, of my breath hitching, of the coffee's faint aroma threading through the room, absurdly steady while I unraveled. Even my shoes suddenly felt too loud against the carpet, as if the room itself was listening. Vivian tilted her head a fraction, studying me with those piercing eyes that always made me feel like she could read my soul, and then a little beyond. Then, almost too subtly to catch, the corner of her mouth moved. A smirk. "I see," she said, voice even, almost playful. My ridiculous heart did that traitor flip. That made me wonder if I was going to pass out on the carpet. She leaned back, took a calm sip of coffee, and it hit me, oh no, that wasn't just a smirk. That was interest. I swallowed, trying not to hyperventilate. "So, are you angry?" The squeak in my voice betrayed every crumb of panic. She leaned forward, elbows settling on the desk. For a sick moment I braced for a lecture, a firing, or a fast-track escort to HR. Instead, angry? No, not exactly. Lower now, teasing. dangerous, intimate in a way that made me want to melt into the floor. "You're ridiculous," she added. I froze. Was that irritation or a laugh? I couldn't tell. My brain was fried. My thoughts a scrambled mess of "I love her and please don't humiliate me." "Ridiculous," I echoed, a thin, helpless laugh escaping. "Yes," she said, eyes glinting like she knew precisely what she was doing to me. Completely and utterly ridiculous and somehow endearing. My knees almost gave. Endearing. Did she just? My pulse kicked hard, and I became acutely aware of how close I was to unraveling right there in her office. Then she leaned closer, that tiny smirk still teasing the edges of her perfect mouth, and whispered, "But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing." Relieved, terrified, faint pick any, they all applied. One thing was certain. Monday had instantly become the most dangerous, intoxicating day of my life. My brain short-circuited the second Vivian lifted that immaculate eyebrow. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was impossibly calm and assessing. The kind of look that makes you feel both exposed and sharply, absurdly alive. I could practically hear my own mortification echo off the walls of her office. I didn't mean I started, my voice tripping over itself like a toddler learning to talk. It was the whine. Not I stopped, realizing just how ridiculous I sounded. My face was probably the color of a ripe tomato, and I could feel every bead of sweat forming along my hairline. Vivian tilted her head slightly, that eyebrow never lowering, her gaze sharp enough to slice through steel. "You confessed your feelings. You were very clear," she said, calm as if stating the weather. "Very clear." The words hit me like a freight train. Very clear. Not a little vague. Not. I think I might have murmured something. Not. You almost said something incoherent. She heard it. She knew it. I had literally handed my heart to her on a silver platter while drunk and incapable of dignity. I groaned and buried my face in my hands for a moment, muttering something incoherent about wine, bad decisions, and my terrible timing. She didn't interrupt, didn't laugh. She just waited perfectly still, like she was letting me stew in my humiliation. Finally, I peeked through my fingers. Her smirk had deepened just slightly. It wasn't mocking. It was curious, almost playful, and for reasons I couldn't explain. That made my stomach flip again violently. I tried again. I didn't think it would. I didn't plan to. It just came out. I wasn't thinking. My voice cracked on the last word, and I winced. She was so composed it was unfair. "You weren't thinking," she repeated, voice low and deliberate, leaning back in her chair. She swirled the coffee in her mug slowly, letting the silence stretch, drawing it out. I could feel every second like a heartbeat skipping, my mind racing with every possible scenario. Fire me, laugh at me, maybe even kiss me. And then, impossibly, she smiled. Just a little subtle knowing smile that made my chest tighten. "You're ridiculous," she said again. Not angry, not disgusted, just impossibly amused. And that one word, ridiculous, felt like a lifeline thrown into the middle of a storm I had created all by myself. I blinked, my throat dry. "Ridiculous?" I whispered, almost laughing at the absurdity of the situation. "Me? You mean me?" "Yes," she said, that same calm certainty that made it impossible to argue. Completely ridiculous and yet somehow charming in the most infuriating way. I swallowed hard, trying not to hyperventilate because apparently that was her type of humor. Or maybe it was my type of emotional torture. Either way, I was trapped in the beautiful, terrifying orbit of Vivian, and my heart, and apparently my dignity, was officially no longer my own. And just like that, the memory of the party came rushing back. The way my words had tumbled out. The warmth of her hand when I'd reached for a napkin. The way her laughter had made me melt entirely. I had been completely exposed, completely human, completely hopelessly in love. And she hadn't run screaming. Then it happened. She laughed. Not a sharp, sarcastic, dismissive laugh. No, this was different. It was light, musical, almost like it had been waiting to escape her lips. And the sound wrapped around me like warm sunlight. My chest tightened and my knees nearly buckled because suddenly I was both terrified and completely captivated. "You're ridiculous," she repeated. And this time there was no edge to it, no judgment, just amusement. Like she'd known all along how hopelessly awkward I could be, and somehow found it utterly endearing. My brain short-circuited completely. Was I supposed to feel mortified, relieved, infatuated? All three at once. I opened my mouth to say something clever, to apologize, to somehow retract my entire existence. But my voice refused to cooperate. It came out as a strangled, high-pitched squeak that probably sounded like a dying animal. Vivian's laugh only deepened, more genuine this time, as if she enjoyed watching me squirm in the most tortuous and delightful way. I glanced down at my hands, twisting them nervously in my lap. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, my ears burning. Every nerve in my body was screaming, "She knows, she knows, she knows." And part of me wanted to run. The other part, more dangerous, more stubborn, wanted to lean across that impossibly polished desk and just kiss her. Her eyes, sharp and teasing, met mine again. There was something unspoken there, something electric. I felt it in my chest, low and insistent, like a warning and a promise at the same time. My stomach fluttered in a way that made me almost laugh at myself. I am supposed to be an adult. I am supposed to be professional. And yet here I am, heart racing because she laughed at me. "You really don't make this easy, do you?" I finally muttered, my voice trembling slightly, half in embarrassment, half in awe. Vivian's smirk widened just a fraction, and she leaned back in her chair, the sunlight catching her hair in a way that made her look even more untouchably perfect. "I wouldn't dream of making it easy," she replied, calm, teasing like a cat watching a mouse skitter nervously across the floor. And just like that, the tension shifted. The fear, the shame, the awkward panic. It didn't disappear, but it transformed into something dangerously addictive. I was hooked. Completely, utterly hooked. The way she laughed, the way she held her gaze, the way her presence made my mind go entirely blank. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and strangely intimate. For a long moment, we just sat there, the silence stretching, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement that everything had changed. Nothing about our dynamic would ever be the same. I was no longer just her employee. I was something else, something closer, something terrifyingly personal. And I had no idea whether I was ready for it or if I even wanted to be. Vivian leaned forward, resting her elbows on the edge of her desk, and lowered her voice just enough that it felt like she was leaning into my brain. Her eyes were sharp, precise, the kind that made it impossible to hide anything. My panic, my embarrassment, my stupid little heartbeat trying to escape my chest. "But you know," she said slowly, letting each word sink in like a carefully measured drop of water. "Maybe we should explore this." I froze. My brain stopped working entirely. Explore this. My stomach did a somersault. My pulse shot up and my tongue went completely numb. Did she just want to date me? Did I actually hear that right? Wait. You mean like date? I asked, my voice higher than intended, tripping over every word. My hands fidgeted with the hem of my blouse. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck, my ears, and even my cheeks. I was a mess, a ridiculous, hopeless mess. "Yes," she said, calm and deliberate, but there was a glimmer in her eyes that made my knees weak. "Date or whatever you want to call it. I don't really care about labels. I just want to see where this goes." I blinked at her, unsure if I was dreaming, hallucinating, or about to pass out entirely. I wanted to respond with something clever, something smooth, something that would make me seem in control, and not completely undone by her sitting there, leaning forward, smiling like she owned my soul. Oh God, I don't even know what to say. I admitted, my voice a mixture of panic and excitement. I felt like a teenager again, completely exposed and ridiculous. Vivian smirked, just the slightest tilt of her lips. But it had the power to make my heart skip several beats. You don't need to say anything, she said. Her voice dropped lower, softer, almost intimate. Just show up. Let's see what happens. No rules, no expectations, just us. I swallowed hard. The way she said us made my stomach flip like a roller coaster. My fingers, clenched wide around my bag, started to shake. My thoughts sprinted in circles, every sensible idea evaporating like mist. She wants this. She actually wants this. I wanted to reach across the desk, catch her hand, and never let go, but I stayed planted. Mouth open, speech abandoning me. At last I croaked, "Okay, yeah, let's do that." Her smirk softened into a small, satisfied smile, the kind that made my chest ache and my pulse kick at once. She leaned back a fraction but never broke eye contact, as if savoring every unfiltered second of my reaction. "Good," she said, easy on the surface, though the warmth in her gaze told a different story. "Because I don't do half measures. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly." I let out a high, nervous laugh that sounded wildly unprofessional. Vivian's chuckle low, soft sent another jolt through me. We both knew there was no going back. I drew a deep breath to steady myself. It didn't help. My brain was fried. My heart was racing, and every instinct screamed, "Run. No. Stay. Stay, and see where this goes." Just like that, a Monday that began in disaster turned into page one of something new, terrifying, thrilling, and completely mine. Vivian and me, starting a story, already rewriting what I thought I knew about work, love, and maybe even myself. Our first date should have been simple. Dinner, a nice place, maybe a glass of wine. How hard could that be? The universe had other plans. Vivian arrived first, impossibly composed, like she'd stepped from a magazine, hair flawless, suit pressed. That effortless elegance that made me want to disappear from equal parts admiration and embarrassment. I trailed in behind her, fumbling with my bag, feeling utterly ordinary and slightly sweaty beside her perfection. Heads turned as she passed. Tension cinched my chest. Yep, everyone's watching. Yep, I'm the disaster. We were seated in a quiet corner, soft golden light making the room feel like a romance film. Vivian skimmed the menu and, with casual ease, ordered lobster like it was her Tuesday routine. I asked for water, knuckles tight around the stem as if it were a lifeline. Then it happened. Mid-gesture, laughing at something she'd said, my hand jerked. Red wine arsed everywhere, soaking my blouse, bleeding across the table, kissing the edge of Vivian's chair. I froze, mind short-circuiting. "Perfect. You just ruined everything again." Vivian looked down, one eyebrow raised, and I was sure she was about to call security or HR. Or maybe just tell me to crawl under the table and stay there forever. Instead, she reached across, took my hand, and held it lightly, comfortingly, and I nearly cried. From embarrassment, from relief, from the sudden realization that this woman, my boss, the untouchable Vivian, was touching me, holding me, not judging me. "Relax," she said quietly, leaning slightly forward so her shoulder almost brushed mine. "It's fine. Honestly, it's fine. You're fine." I blinked at her, my voice coming out as a strangled squeak. Yeah, fine. Totally fine," I muttered, attempting to sound casual, which was laughably impossible. Vivian smirked, just that tiny, infuriating smirk that made me want to throw myself across the table and kiss her. "You're ridiculous," she said softly, like it was a compliment. My chest tightened. Ridiculous was exactly what I was. Yes. But the way she said it made me feel human in a way I hadn't felt in years. We laughed awkwardly in fits that drew a few curious glances from neighboring tables. I kept knocking over utensils, spilling bits of bread on the table. and at one point even nearly knocked my glass over again. But she just chuckled and reached for my hand, squeezing it once. That single simple gesture made everything, the spilled wine, my shaking hands, the mess I was making, fade into the background. She leaned closer at one point, whispering something I could barely hear over my own racing heartbeat. I like that you're real, not fake, not perfect, just you. I nearly melted on the spot. My face burned hotter than any embarrassment I'd ever felt. Thanks, I stammered, fumbling for words, trying to pull my hand away, but finding I didn't want to, couldn't. Her fingers were warm, grounding, and somehow thrilling all at once. Dinner continued, and I gradually stopped worrying about making a fool of myself. We talked, laughed, teased, shared stupid little jokes, and somehow the awkwardness turned into something intimate. Every glance, every brush of our hands under the table, every accidental laugh that made us lean closer, it all built a tension that was as terrifying as it was intoxicating. By the time dessert arrived, my blouse was ruined. My cheeks were on fire, and I was utterly, hopelessly in love. Vivian leaned back, smirk still in place, and whispered, "You're a disaster." But my kind of disaster. I laughed nervously, gripping her hand under the table. Good. I was hoping for a disaster I could survive. She squeezed my hand, eyes glinting with mischief and warmth. And in that moment, despite the chaos, I realized something. I didn't care about perfection. I didn't care about looking graceful. I just wanted to stay there, holding her hand, laughing at myself, and seeing where this us went. And somehow that messy, ridiculous, wine-stained dinner was perfect. Weeks passed after that first disaster of a date, and somehow the dynamic between Vivian and me shifted completely. Our office, which had once felt rigid, cold, and suffocating, started to feel different, like it was secretly ours, a stage for something far more interesting than spreadsheets and board meetings. It started small. A glance across the room during a meeting that lingered just a second too long. A subtle smirk when someone made a ridiculous comment. Whispered nicknames that no one else was supposed to hear. Chaos queen, bossy disaster, silly, harmless things. But they made my chest warm in a way I couldn't explain. I found myself grinning at my laptop like an idiot, thinking about the way she winked at me while passing by the printer. And I had to fight not to squeal quietly into my coffee cup. One afternoon, we were trapped in the elevator together. Of course, because of course. I was already awkward, pressing myself against the far corner, trying not to trip over my own feet. Vivian leaned nonchalantly against the wall, arms crossed, smirking like this was entirely her plan all along. "You're wearing that blouse again," she said softly, almost teasing. What? I stammered, looking down. Oh, yeah, it's clean, she chuckled, and it was impossible to ignore. That sound, low and amused, made my stomach do a weird little flip. "It's fine. I just like that color on you. It makes you look dangerously approachable." I choked on my own breath and coughed, frantically waving my hands. "What does that even mean?" "You know exactly what it means," she said, leaning closer. So close I could feel her warmth and smell that faint perfume I was suddenly addicted to. My knees nearly buckled. I was officially lost in an elevator with Vivian, and there was nowhere to escape. And then she grinned. That grin. That mischievous, infuriating grin that made my heart hammer so hard I was sure she could hear it. "Don't worry, disaster girl," she whispered almost conspiratorially. "I've got plans for you. Big plans." I laughed, breathless, embarrassed, thrilled all at once. "Plans? Dangerous plans." "Exactly," she said, eyes twinkling. "Plans that involve making you laugh, making you squirm, and maybe, just maybe, making you fall for me even harder." I swore my brain melted right there in the elevator. And in that tiny, impossible space, we shared our first private joke. A secret little smirk at each other that no one else would ever understand. The world outside that elevator vanished. For just a moment, it was Vivian and me, two idiots tangled in something dangerously fun. After that, the jokes multiplied. Little slips kept appearing on my desk notes with messages only I would catch. The lightest touches followed, her fingers grazing mine as she passed a file. A playful poke when she caught me pulling a ridiculous face. In meetings, our eyes would lock a heartbeat too long, and that same electric jolt would rip through my chest. Overnight, the ordinary turned volatile, charged with tension, edged with intimacy. The office felt less like work and more like a rom-com set I'd wandered onto by accident. Co-starring Vivian, my boss, my temptation, my chaos, my heart. Each day blended laughter and longing with the delicious terror of doing something utterly foolish in front of her and knowing she'd find it adorable. By the time I noticed, I was hooked on her laugh, on her touch, on the small private world we were sneaking into existence under fluorescent lights, around conference tables, right beneath the noses of unsuspecting coworkers. And I didn't want to stop. Not ever. One of those nights, the rain wouldn't quit tapping the windows in its own rhythm, keeping Harborview City awake. I was about to leave when I realized Vivian hadn't gone either. Then the elevator broke. Of course it did. Perfect timing. Just us, stuck after hours. I tried to play it cool. Looks like we're trapped, I said with a forced laugh, while my stomach did cartwheels. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, one eyebrow arched, and I could feel the air grow heavier with charge. "You're not freaking out?" she asked, eyes glinting like she knew exactly what was spinning through my head. Well, a little, I admitted, my voice trembling. "Good," she said softly, stepping close enough that her warmth washed over me and my knees threatened mutiny. The elevator shrank round us, too warm, too wired, too full of possibility. We started with small talk work, deadlines, the absurdity of being marooned in a busted elevator, but everything carried a second current. Every glance lingered, every brush of skin sparked. Then it happened. Our fingers met just to graze at first. An accident, or so I told myself. Vivian didn't pull away. She laced our fingers and gave a gentle squeeze, a bolt straight to my core. My heart pounded so hard I was sure she could hear it. "You know," she murmured, leaning in until her breath ghosted my cheek. "This is ridiculous. But I don't care." "Ridiculous how?" I whispered, already knowing. She smiled, that infuriating, intoxicating smile, the one that made me want to fold into her and never leave. "Us, you, me, all of this." Before I could answer, she closed the distance. Our lips met, tentative, lingering, softly exploratory, electric. I lit up from the inside. I understood then how much I'd wanted this, wanted her long before I'd admitted it to myself. We parted just enough to breathe, foreheads touching. "I've never felt this close to anyone," I confessed, barely louder than the rain. "Me neither," she said, her fingers brushing my cheek with a tenderness that melted me. "It's terrifying and amazing, and I don't know, but I like it." We spent the rest of the night inches apart, sharing what we'd never told another soul, childhood dreams, stupid fears, little secrets too embarrassing to say anywhere else. Every word, every touch, every glance pulled us closer until the elevator no longer felt like a cage, but a private sanctuary. By the time someone finally came to fix it, neither of us wanted to move. I felt closer to Vivian than I had ever felt to anyone, closer than I had thought possible. And somewhere between the rain, the whispered secrets, and the lingering warmth of her hand in mine, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I didn't just like her. I needed her, and she needed me. We stepped out of that elevator, changed, tangled in an intimacy that went far beyond stolen glances and private jokes. An intimacy that touched the very core of who we were, and that neither of us would ever be able to ignore again. It was a normal Tuesday, or at least as normal as Tuesdays could be when Vivian and I were involved. I thought we had successfully kept our situation under wraps, Private jokes, stolen glances, lingering touches under the table. Manageable, containable, office appropriate, until her assistant, the ever-perceptive Sloane, walked in. We were leaving a meeting together, subtly brushing our hands as we passed through the hallway. Just a simple light touch. I didn't think anyone would notice. But apparently Sloane had been hiding behind the corner like some kind of office ninja, silently taking note of everything. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened. I swear I heard a faint squeak, and then she froze. Vivian, calm as ever, didn't miss a beat. She turned slowly, eyes narrowing in mock menace, and said, "Sloane, pretend you didn't see anything or you're fired." I nearly choked on my own breath. Not because of the threat. Obviously, Vivian was teasing, but because of the way she delivered it, sharp, commanding, yet somehow playful. I could feel my face burning, and I wanted the floor to open and swallow me whole. Sloane, clearly both terrified and thrilled, nodded vigorously, mumbling something about completely misunderstood before scuttling away. I burst into silent laughter, pressing a hand to my mouth to hide it. Vivian's eyes met mine, that little smirk tugging at her lips, and I nearly lost it completely. "You're ridiculous," she whispered, leaning close enough that I could feel her breath on my cheek. "Absolutely ridiculous." Well, you kind of are, too," I whispered back, voice shaky with laughter and adrenaline. "Threatening people and holding my hand like we're in some sort of drama." She chuckled, a low, soft sound that made my chest flutter. "You think you're going to get through this without anyone noticing?" I shrugged helplessly, knowing full well that no matter how careful we were, our chemistry was too electric to stay hidden. "Apparently not," I admitted, eyes darting to make sure no one else was within earshot. "But hey, it's kind of fun, right?" Vivian leaned closer, brushing her fingers lightly over the back of my hand. That touch sent a jolt straight through me. "Fun for you, maybe," she said, voice teasing, but a little terrifying for me. "Can you imagine the HR nightmare?" I laughed, a short, breathless sound. "I think we're already past HR's nightmare level. We're probably somewhere in the office apocalypse zone." Her eyes twinkled dangerously, and I realized she was enjoying every second of it. "Good," she said simply. "I like a little chaos. Keeps things interesting." I bit my lip to stop another laugh, my heart racing, not from fear, but from excitement. Office romance was officially code red, and somehow I loved it. I loved her. I loved the dangerous, exhilarating tension that turned every hallway walk, every elevator ride, every meeting into a private thrill and a potential disaster all at once. I knew, bone deep, that neither of us could ever return to normal. Normal had become unbearably dull the moment Vivian stepped into my life and didn't let go. Nothing lasts without a fight. And apparently, ours had arrived. It began at a networking event, one of those stuffy affairs where smiles are too wide, voices too loud, and everyone tries far too hard to impress Vivian. She was flawless as ever. Perfect posture, a suit tailored within an inch of its life, laughing at all the right beats, making every person feel seen. I hovered nearby, clutching my glass like a lifeline, willing myself not to look like a puddle of nerves. Then it happened. A client, a stunning, polished woman who could sell ice to Antarctica, leaned in toward Vivian. "You're amazing," she said, beaming. "I don't know how you manage it all." My stomach twisted. My pulse spiked. I told myself it was harmless, purely professional, but jealousy crashed through me like a wrecking ball. I caught Vivian's arm a shade too firmly. "Yeah, you're amazing, too," I said, clipped, defensive, ridiculous. Vivian turned, eyes narrowing, one eyebrow lifting with that perfect blend of disbelief and irritation. "Really? You're getting jealous over a polite compliment?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried that sharp edge of "I can't believe this." And heat climbed my neck. I just... Words tripped over themselves. "I don't like feeling. I don't know. Replaceable." Her jaw tightened, I'd crossed a line, or so it felt. She sighed, raked a hand through her hair, frustration breaking through her usual polish. And it made my chest ache. "You're ridiculous," she said quietly without the playful lilt. "I don't want anyone else. You're not replaceable. You're you." I froze. The reassurance should have soothed me, but pride flared. I opened my mouth to argue, and she cut in. "Let's just cool off." The words landed firm, final. She pivoted and walked away. The floor vanished under me. I stalked off in the opposite direction, muttering, trying to convince myself I hadn't overreacted, that my feelings were justified. But with every step, the ache in my chest tightened. By the end of the hallway, anger had drained out, leaving panic heart racing, desperate to fix it, yet too stubborn to chase her immediately. 5 minutes later, I was pacing by the entrance, trying for casual and failing miserably. There she was, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, foot tapping, a smirk teasing her lips. That smirk was infuriating. It made me want to punch her and kiss her at the same time. "You missed me," she said, light and teasing, though underneath I heard the small, nearly hidden admission that she felt the same pull. Maybe," I said, cheeks heating. She stepped closer and brushed her fingers against mine. That tiny, intimate touch sent shockwaves through me. Every nerve fired at once, relief, longing, and unfiltered desire. "I missed you, too," she whispered, so soft it almost vanished, leaning in until our foreheads nearly touched. My chest ached, equal parts frustration and joy. We didn't speak for a long moment. We didn't need to. The fight, the jealousy, the frustration, the ridiculous overthinking, it all melted away under the intensity of being near her, of feeling her close, of sharing that tension-filled magnetic silence that only she could create. Eventually, I leaned closer, daring to press my lips to hers lightly, soft at first, tentative, but soon deeper, more insistent. Every second of the fight was absorbed into that kiss, transforming our frustration into something far more intimate. When we finally pulled away, breathless, I realized something important. Even our fights had their own intimacy. They revealed us in a way nothing else could. Our fears, our vulnerabilities, our need for each other. And somehow, in the messiness, the chaos, and the ridiculous jealousy, I knew that no argument could ever drive us apart. It would only pull us closer, because Vivian and I, messy, chaotic, complicated, was worth every fight, every flare of pride, every heartbeat that skipped when we finally found our way back to each other. The tension from our first fight had lingered longer than either of us liked to admit. Vivian and I hadn't spoken much since that ridiculous networking event, and the silence was deafening. Every glance across the office felt loaded. Every accidental touch became a silent question. "Are we still okay?" Finally, she sent me a message. "Meet me at my place. I have wine and chocolate. We need to fix this." I arrived nervous, hands clammy, heart thundering like it was going to jump straight out of my chest. She opened the door, looking effortlessly perfect as always. But that smirk, that mischievous glint in her eyes told me she knew exactly how frazzled I was. "Come in," she said casually, waving me inside. The apartment was cozy, warm, lights dimmed, soft music playing. And there on the kitchen counter sat a bottle of red wine, 2 glasses, and a box of fancy chocolate. I stepped closer, trying to act casual while my brain screamed, "She's your boss. Your heart is about to explode. Don't screw this up." Vivian poured the wine, handed me a glass, and grinned. "So, you want to apologize? Or should I start?" I laughed nervously, shaking my head. "I think I'm supposed to apologize first." My words came out faster than I intended, all stuttered and awkward. She tilted her head, raising an eyebrow. "You're adorable when you panic," I groaned, but it was impossible not to grin back. "Thanks," I muttered, taking a sip of wine, trying to hide the fact that my chest was already tight with anticipation. We talked, really talked about the fight, about jealousy, about overthinking. about why we mattered to each other. Every word drew us closer. Every shared laugh melted away the leftover tension. Vivian leaned in occasionally, brushing my hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering just a second too long. I caught myself leaning into her touch, craving it. Then came the chocolate. One piece led to another. One piece led to playful shoving. One piece led to her smearing a tiny bit of chocolate on my nose while laughing. And I couldn't help but laugh, too. Loud, uncontrollable, breathless laughter. Before I knew it, we'd collapsed on the floor, sitting cross-legged, our faces inches apart, noses almost touching, laughing so hard that tears ran down our cheeks. I had never felt intimacy like this. Not in movies, not in books, not in any relationship I'd ever had. Messy, chaotic, ridiculous, and utterly perfect. Vivian leaned closer, her forehead brushing mine, and whispered, "You know, I think this is better than making up in a boring, serious way." I nodded, heart hammering, unable to stop smiling. "Way better," I said, voice soft. Our hands found each other again, fingers entwined naturally, effortlessly. In that small, silly, chocolate living room, we didn't need grand gestures. We didn't need words. The laughter, the touches, the soft brush of her lips against my temple. They said everything, and I realized with a jolt of happiness that nearly made me dizzy. That love didn't have to be perfect for us. It could be messy, chaotic, slightly absurd, and I wouldn't want it any other way because Vivian was my chaos, and I was completely hopelessly hers. It started with a simple text. "Pack a bag. We're leaving." No questions. I stared at my phone for a solid minute, heart hammering in my chest. No questions. Really? Is this safe? Do I trust her? Of course. I trusted her mostly. But my brain refused to stop imagining every possible disaster. By the time I got to her car, she was already leaning against it, arms crossed, smirking like she'd read my thoughts. "Ready?" she asked, tossing me the keys. I think so," I muttered, fumbling for the keys like an idiot. She laughed, the kind of laugh that made my stomach do somersaults. "Good. That's all the commitment I need." The drive out of Harborview City was strangely quiet at first. The skyline receded, replaced by stretches of open road, scattered trees, and the smell of wet asphalt after the afternoon rain. Vivian was in control behind the wheel, effortlessly confident, occasionally tapping along to whatever music was playing. I, on the other hand, sat beside her, knees pressed together, fingers drumming nervously against my leg, heart pounding at every glance she threw my way. "Relax," she said suddenly, catching my attention. "You look like you're about to jump out of the car at any second." I'm fine," I lied. Even though my chest felt like it was about to explode, she smirked. That familiar smirk that always made me simultaneously want to groan and kiss her. "Sure, totally fine." By the time we arrived at her lake house, the sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and orange. The dock creaked underfoot as we stepped out, and I felt like I'd walked onto a movie set. Vivian turned to me, eyes glinting with mischief. "Welcome to your weekend of chaos," she said. Chaos indeed. The kitchen became our battlefield. First, we decided to cook dinner together. Should have been simple, right? Wrong. I burned the garlic, spilled flour across the counter, and somehow managed to knock over half the wine bottles while trying to uncork one. Vivian, of course, laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd seen all week, swooping in to save the day. "You're a disaster," she said, brushing flour off my cheek, fingers lingering a second too long. Thanks," I stammered, heart racing, cheeks flaming. "And yet somehow I can't get enough of you," she added, leaning in slightly, nose grazing mine. My knees nearly gave out. We ended up dancing barefoot in the kitchen. I have no idea how it started. Maybe one of us made a joke about my terrible cooking. Soon we were twirling, stepping on each other's feet, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. At one point, she caught my waist to steady me, and the heat of her body against mine sent my pulse racing, terrifying and intoxicating all at once. Later, we collapsed on the couch with wine and a box of chocolates. One bite became two, then three, and before long we were feeding each other, giggling when a smear of chocolate ended up on a cheek. "You're ridiculous," Vivian murmured, wiping my nose with her thumb, her eyes soft and warm. "I know," I said, grinning, leaning into her touch. "And apparently you like ridiculous." "I do," she whispered, tracing lazy circles on the back of my hand. "Especially you." That night we sat on the dock, legs dangling over the water, trading secrets we'd never shared with anyone else. I told her about childhood embarrassments, the fears I hate admitting, the silly little dreams I keep tucked away. She offered hers, laughing at herself in a way that made me love her more. Every word, every look, every laugh drew us tighter together. When the air turned cold, she pulled me into her arms, and the world slipped out of focus. Her warmth soaked through me, and I understood something. Love with her wasn't grand gestures or pristine moments. It lived in the tiny, ridiculous, intimate details, the messy laughter, the flour on our hands, the stolen touches, the whispered confessions, the quiet ease of simply existing together. Vivian kissed the top of my head and murmured, "You're my favorite part of chaos." I pressed my face to her shoulder, heart swelling. "And you're mine." For the first time, I didn't need anything else. No perfection, no plans, no sweeping declarations. Just her, me, and the messy, chaotic, perfectly imperfect love we were making. The sky over the lake was spotless that night, one of those rare, flawless evenings when the air feels velvety and the water lies like melted glass. Vivian hauled an old blanket onto the dock, insisting we had to properly appreciate the stars, which I quickly decoded as her wanting to hold me while pretending she wasn't a hopeless romantic. We lay side by side, shoulders touching, crickets stitching sound all around us. The air smelled faintly of pine and lake water. For once, everything was still. No deadlines, no office, no rules, just us. "See that one?" she asked, pointing at a cluster of stars that looked like randoms to me. "The big shiny one?" I squinted. She laughed softly. "That's the moon, genius." I nudged her arm and rolled my eyes. "Okay, so I'm not the astronomy expert. You're something else, that's for sure," she said, and her voice shifted in a heartbeat from playful to gentle. Her hand brushed against mine on the blanket, and she didn't move it away. Instead, her fingers hooked between mine, slow, deliberate, almost shy. It was such a small thing, but it hit me like a lightning bolt. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and suddenly the words I'd been holding back for weeks were right there, pushing at the back of my throat. "I love you." I could feel it building. The warmth, the ache, the need to say it. The silence between us stretched, heavy but sweet. I turned my head toward her, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear the wind anymore. She was already looking at me. Her expression was soft, unguarded in a way I'd rarely seen. No cool, polished CEO confidence, just Vivian. Real, human, warm. "I need to tell you something," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Her lips curved into a tiny smile like she already knew. "Yeah." I took a shaky breath, my heart practically screaming the words. But before I could finish, she leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. "I love you," she whispered, just like that. Simple, certain, effortless. For a moment, everything stopped. The waves, the wind, even my thoughts. I just stared at her completely still, trying to process the fact that Vivian Kingsley, billionaire boss, queen of composure, had just said she loved me first. "You what?" I stammered, half laughing, half crying. She smiled, that slow, devastating smile that could melt metal. "Don't make me repeat it," she teased softly. "You'll make it less romantic." I laughed, but it came out broken, choked with emotion. My throat felt tight, my eyes burned, and all I could do was pull her closer. She slid her arm under me, wrapping me against her chest, holding me so tightly it felt like she was trying to keep me from floating away. For a long time, we didn't talk. We didn't need to. My head rested against her collarbone, feeling her heartbeat against my cheek. She traced slow circles on my back with her fingers, and I felt more grounded, more safe, more seen than I ever had in my life. When I finally managed to breathe again, I whispered against her skin. "You beat me to it." She chuckled quietly. "I wasn't going to risk you chickening out. I was totally going to say it," I mumbled. And she laughed again, tilting my chin up so I'd look at her. "Then say it now," she murmured. I smiled, cheeks still wet from tears I didn't even realize had fallen. "I love you." Her eyes softened. "Yeah," she whispered, pressing her forehead against mine. "I know." We stayed like that, tangled up, hearts pressed together, the stars above us spinning in quiet approval. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was falling anymore. I felt like I'd landed right where I was supposed to be. I woke up the next morning to an empty bed, the sheets still warm, but distinctly devoid of Vivian. Panic hit me immediately. Did I say something wrong? Did I overshare? Did I scare her? My heart raced so fast I was certain it could be heard in the next room. I tiptoed to the kitchen, half expecting to find her brewing coffee and smirking at me. But the apartment was silent. Too silent. Then I noticed it. A small envelope on the pillow where she had been sleeping. My hand shook slightly as I picked it up, half afraid, half curious. The handwriting was unmistakable, precise, elegant, and undeniably Vivian. I tore it open. Inside was a single note. "Surprise. I just bought the building. Your office is now officially mine. Love, Vivian." I froze, blinked, read it again. Slowly, the pieces fell into place. She literally bought our love story. I collapsed back onto the bed, laughing so hard I cried. Tears ran down my cheeks, but I couldn't stop. The absurdity, the audacity, the sheer vines of it. She had taken our chaotic, messy, passionate little relationship and turned it into a full-on, undeniable statement. Her power, her wealth, her humor, all wrapped into one ridiculous, perfect gesture. A knock at the door pulled me from my laughter. "Come on," she called, voice teasing, but unmistakably smug. "Breakfast. And don't tell me you haven't already started planning your resignation letter to celebrate your new office ownership." I stumbled toward her, still wiping tears from my eyes. "You are impossible," I said, laughing breathlessly. She grinned, standing in the doorway, sunlight catching her hair, looking like the absolute queen of the world. "And you love it," she said, raising an eyebrow. I think I do," I admitted, feeling my cheeks heat. You just wow. I can't even." She rolled her eyes, but in that smirk, there was warmth, affection, and the thrill of shared insanity. "You're lucky you like me," she said, walking over and sweeping me into a hug so tight it knocked the wind out of me. "Because apparently I'm not going anywhere." I laughed again, letting myself melt into her arms, feeling the weight of both reality and absurdity. Our love was chaotic, ridiculous, messy, and utterly ours. And in that moment, I realized that nothing, not awkward confessions, not fights, not spilled wine, not even stolen chocolate, could ever come close to the brilliance of us. Vivian pressed her forehead to mine, smiling softly. "So, about owning the building," she whispered. I laughed again, shaking my head, heart overflowing. Best twist ever. And in that tiny, absurd, perfect moment, I knew one thing for sure. With her, life was never boring, and I never wanted it to be. If someone had told me a year ago that one drunken confession at an office party would end with me dating, no, living with my billionaire boss, I would have laughed in their face, probably choked on my drink while doing it. But here I am sitting on the edge of our massive bed, hair messy, still half asleep, while Vivian walks around in one of my t-shirts, yelling at her laptop about some merger that probably involves more zeros than I'll ever see in my life. Babe, I say, stretching. It's Saturday. No billion-dollar talk until after breakfast. She doesn't even look up. Tell that to the stock market. I groan dramatically, throwing a pillow at her. She catches it midair because of course she does and smirks. Really? I say, grabbing another pillow and swinging it at her. This one lands, she gasps in mock offense, then lunges at me, tackling me back onto the bed in a flurry of laughter and sheets. So, yes, our mornings are a mix of board meetings and pillow fights. Sometimes she's this unstoppable, intimidating CEO, commanding attention in designer suits. Other times, she's barefoot in the kitchen at 2 a.m. eating cereal straight from the box while lecturing me about hydration. Somehow, both versions are equally irresistible. At work, things got interesting. Office professionalism became a bit of a running joke between us. Every time we'd pass each other in the hallway, she'd flash me that secret little smile that made my knees weak. During meetings, her hand would brush mine under the table, subtle enough that no one noticed except me every single time. And sometimes when the day ended and the office emptied out, she'd lean against my desk, pretending to talk about reports while slowly inching closer until her voice dropped to a whisper. You're still coming home with me, right? Like I could ever say no. Our nights are their own kind of chaos. Cooking disasters that always end with takeout. Movie marathons where she inevitably falls asleep halfway through. And quiet moments where I catch her watching me like she still can't believe we ended up here. One night, while we were curled up on the couch, her laptop finally closed for once. She looked at me and said, "You know, you've completely ruined my reputation." I laughed. "Oh no, the terrifying billionaire has gone soft." She smirked, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Completely. And I knew what she meant. We'd both changed each other in ways neither of us had planned. She made me braver. I made her human together. We were still a mess, but a beautiful one. I still replay that office party night sometimes, how painfully awkward, foolish, and tipsy I was. How the words tumbled out before I could stop them. I blurted everything. She could have laughed it off, fired me, or simply walked away. But she didn't. She leaned in. She chose me. Now, every day feels like a braid of chaos and comfort. Conference calls and cuddles. Deadlines and slow dances in the kitchen. Arguments over contracts followed by makeup kisses that linger far too long. And honestly, I wouldn't trade a single second. Because with Vivian, life isn't a flawless fairy tale. It's a rom-com. There are off days, spilled coffee, razor-sharp comebacks, and more wine than we need. But there's also laughter, trust, warmth, and the kind of love that doesn't fade when the credits roll. As I drift off beside her, her arms slung lazy across my waist, I flash back to that night, my slurred confession, her stunned expression, the chaos that came after, and I can't help smiling. I can't believe this is our life. I whisper, half asleep. She murmurs against my shoulder. You better believe it, sweetheart. And that's when it lands. This isn't a tidy happily ever after. It's a happily right now. And with her, that's more than enough.